And now I am turning the microphone over to a gentleman I have a lot of history with. And to give a little backstory, back whenever I was a high school student that was struggling in a lot of ways in my life, I had the great fortune of having a rebel rock star Spanish teacher for my high school Spanish class, and that is Ed Bamford. And Ed is a Spanish language instructor at Moon Area High School. He goes by Buddy, and there's a reason for that. He is a fantastic friend to all that he meets, and he is a champion for students, especially those like me who sometimes are on the struggle bus with various different things. And so I want to go ahead and turn things over to Ed to tell us a little bit more about basic or beyond basic storytelling and how he makes things fun for his students. So Ed, want to go ahead and welcome you. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Sir, thank you for the compliment. You made my night, really, really did. And thank you for all the participants tonight. This is the first time that I've ever been asked to do anything and share my knowledge. I hope that I can contribute something to you. I'll agree, you're amazing. I mean, following you, I'm not worthy of those footsteps, but a different perspective and a different background I have, and I wanted to share it with you to hopefully inspire you now and into the future. Again, my name is Buddy Bamford. I started my career, honestly, never planned on being a teacher. My expectations were to work in an office and become an accountant, a CPA, and otherwise. And a series of bad experiences at my jobs took me further and further off track to where I, wanted to be. And the story of my accounting career looked like this picture right here. If you're born in the 90s or later, you would probably recognize this movie called Office Space. And I was Peter. I was disenfranchised with all the things that I learned in school. And to be quite honest with you, my everyday existence working with students and not in an environment like this is an amazing inspiration. And I commend anyone who's had this experience, and some of you out there have. I was actually fired probably more than once, but at least once from the accounting, and nothing embarrassing or anything like that. It's a story I tell my students. It really came down to an ethical issue that I had with a boss, and I took my moral conscience with me, and no shame. It's a story I tell all of the students, and one of the greater lessons to tell the younger people in our class, virtually or live, is that making mistakes is acceptable. Growing from them is the essence of our existence. I went back to school, but prior to graduating, I taught in an elementary school in the Pittsburgh Public School District. I worked with two senior teachers, and we worked together to make school a wonderful place for the students. Sad truth is, they had an administrator who was set up to fail, and had this really unique experience, which was probably one of the most life-altering experiences. I shared my slide with Sarah the other night, and she was like, I don't exactly know what you mean by a punching bag. Well, two elementary students got into a fight. I think they were sixth graders. And the principal asked me to go with him, and we went to the boiler room, and there was a punching bag. We knew that there was an exercise machine and what have you. I was 3 weeks, a month, 2 months away from working in an office, completely different experience. So when the principal said to the one kid, go ahead and punch that punching bag. After 30 seconds of punching the punching bag, the kid said, look, I am completely tired. Can I quit? And the principal said no. He looked at his watch, another 30 seconds. And then after the minute was over, the other kid had the same opportunity. The experience was very similar. And once the two kids had spent 1 minute each punching the punching bag, the principal said, now do you guys want to fight? And the two kids organically looked at each other and said, you're crazy. And they realized how stupid what they were doing, and really no discipline was needed, and the problem was solved. And so many of my experiences were formed by these non-expecting. I simply wasn't expecting these things to happen with me. I did graduate Duquesne University. No disrespect to the university, didn't learn a ton. Technically, I would tell you all to know the Buckley Amendment. I did learn what the word eclectic was, and there was one other thing, but that's that. Anyways, I was finally hired at Moon Area High School in, I believe, 1999, and my feeling was that of a person just being handed the keys to a sports car. There was absolutely no limits. There was not sure that there was a curriculum, and simply I was given the instruction by the principal, build the program. And to be very honest with you, that's exactly what I did. From the very first day, I had various realizations, more so as my career went on. And I built my presentation tonight about the sequence of realizations I've had in my teaching career, some of which younger teachers you might have not experienced yet. Some of you veteran teachers probably realized this much earlier than I did. But in either case, never a bad case to revisit. As Alegria mentioned, and I'm sure that every teacher out there is aware of, there is a concept called the effective filter. I had a different slide yesterday, but this one probably illustrates it better. Visually, a filter blocking the information we're trying to pass on to our students based on stress, lack of input, and other items. Even though the dates of these are incredibly in the past, the natural theory of language instruction is something that I would keep in mind to all of you. And I'm pretty sure when I was watching Alegria, it was very much a natural part of your instruction as well. There should be a ton of my speaking to the students before we can expect them to otherwise. Theory that a parent doesn't teach their child the target language by handing them a worksheet or otherwise. It's simply by speaking to the child until the child naturally understands and can respond with errors, but improvement along the way. There's also the interaction hypothesis. I was a brick and mortar teacher, am a brick and mortar teacher, but absolutely learned how to teach online through the pandemic and so forth and so on. And in both cases, I'm reading from the last sentence, creating a classroom environment focused on interaction among students is crucial. We learned very quickly that if you didn't have the students interacting with you and others during pandemic teaching, we really didn't have great accountability for their actions. There is another idea called thinking outside of the box. I'm kind of scared to leave my PowerPoint and try to come back in it, so I'm not going to go out there yet. But back in the day, there was a theory called thinking outside of the box. And one of the ideas here is just talking to the students to get ideas from it. This is in the time that I was teaching Sarah, just rolling with what the students were coming up with. I had a link for that. So one of my, oh, please tell me if I got to go back. How do I get the video? You got to go back one. Why is that not working?
Your left arrow key might be your friend.
Go there. I'm sorry. Oh, well, that video is not going to work, but that's all right, Stephen. Thank you. So anyways, the essence of my teaching, the video that I was trying to show was that of me driving my dog to doggy daycare. And I gave instructions to my students what we were going to do that day in class. I was giving driving directions while I was driving it, and probably wasn't the most legal or intelligent thing a person can do. But I created a culture in my classroom that students would simply come in to watch to see what was going to happen next. Effectively, and I didn't know it at the time, but lowering the effective filter, because it really came to the extent that if I was willing to do something and they said, I don't really care if it's funny if it's a fail or otherwise, it's absolutely worth a try. And I think from the very beginning, that was the essence of my classroom. I would go on as time went on that a good rubric is an absolutely necessary thing to have. And again, I'm sure whether you're a brand new teacher or an experienced teacher, you've had some thoughts on that. Over time, I've realized that using a holistic rubric is much better than using an analytic rubric. Doing real life presentations, you want to be making eye contact with the students and not have your head buried in the rubric. One of the things, I don't know if other members of the audience, if your number of years taught, but back in maybe like 2011 or 2012, there was a learning theorist, a motivator named Dr. Stephen Covey, who had a series of books, one the techniques and habits of highly successful people. as we teach, the notion of having an objective in our classroom should be the essence of what we're doing, and so forth and so on. And what I do is I always plan out myself and sometimes interact with the students to make sure we know what product we're looking for. And if you've never read his book, I would strongly encourage it. Another important aspect, probably more important online than it was or in person, is the having a class participation rubric. Having the nervous, leaving my PowerPoint, but later on you'll have access to it, I'm sure, through the power of Stephen and technology, to take a look at some of my work. And I would love to share any of the rubrics that I have and obviously work with you and the ideas that you're having. But in essence, as my career evolved, it was nice when some classes, Sarah's class specifically, I don't know that they needed a rubric. They simply were ambitious and ready to work and reacting positively to the environment I was trying to create. Very honest experience now, students are very overwhelmed with things, and sometimes a little bit of motivation is necessary. So there's my holistic versus analytic rubric. Realization number 4, the world has changed and I need to change with it. I think one of the biggest problems teachers my age are having, not so much by age, but experience, is we're trying to do things that worked 10 years ago, and simply the student, the learner, the person, their perceptions of the world and all things have changed. And I know you already know this, but one thing that's helped me grow as a storyteller, as a teacher, and I'd like to, think of myself as a little bit of a life coach, is to be able to relate to the students, not necessarily to give in, because I don't think our relationship with them is to be that. But equally, I say to you, while changing with the times is awesome, remember we got you there. And one of our former teachers always used the expression, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I personally don't use TikTok, not advocating that you do. Sarah and I had a good conversation about this last night, but I've learned a little bit of TikTok language. I'm not going to teach you or share any of that with you right now, but I also have a link, and maybe towards the end, I'll kind of dare to leave my presentation and walk you through some of these things, but they were just links to websites. A lot of times I say to my students, am I out of pocket? Out of pocket means, am I in the wrong? Did I do something, to offend? And absolutely, they didn't expect you to understand and talk that way. There are boundaries, clearly, we all know that. But as I continue and evolve as a language teacher, one thing that I find it to be absolutely necessary is not to live in the world that I started my career off in. I have to realistically live in the life and eyes of the students that I'm teaching. Otherwise, I, become much more irrelevant. Something else that I go back to frequently in my career is called focus correction areas. I can't see the chat right now because I'm definitely operating on all cylinders just trying to talk, but focus correction areas were one of the best writing tools that I've ever seen in my career. I'd love to have a conversation with people about that, but it did have a singular flaw as I was trying to teach Spanish and create 3 different focus correction areas. It really became extraordinarily cumbersome to grade, but learning how to adapt them, maybe with 1 focus correction area or 2, something is good. And these things will continue to evolve into, further activities. Quite honestly, a lot of now experienced teaching is that students do want to write things down. They don't necessarily feel comfortable just standing up producing, not due to lack of language ability, but probably just the more introverted personalities that they are. Embrace the moment when school becomes cool. I'll be very honest with you. I told you I got fired from my job before, and accounting, not on the teaching end of it. Sometimes we just break down, and let me see if I can do this because I'm not doing you guys justice. If I go into new share, and let me go into my desktop. Yeah, I'm not going to mess up things like that. Oh, I think I already did. Stephen.
You might try just clicking on the file link. It might very well open up the file.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Sorry, everyone. Anyways, this is my son on the left. I asked him to come into my classroom, and he's quite the guitarist. And this young lady who was in the chorus, with her permission, she's just started come up and singing. And if you saw how many people who were standing at the door at the left-hand side, it was absolutely amazing. He played a couple of different class periods, and we did holiday songs and some, Christmas type villancicos and such. And it was just a fun day. On this picture, I'm the guy on the left in the blue shirt, and surrounding me are two students who was dressed like your teacher day, and we're having fun with the fact that I come into school with pretty dirty shoes, khaki pants, a wrinkly shirt, and I'm kind of notorious for eating hand sanitizer. It's probably shortened my life a little bit too much. Anyways, my next realization that I had was personalize, prioritize, and epitomize. In order to personalize something for, sadly, more of my career than not, I was not always aware of what was going on with my students. I simply was trying to cover lessons, teach information, and occasionally make them laugh. If you're not familiar with student assistance programs, SAP, I have a link here which would take you to the Pennsylvania State SAP program. I'm lucky enough as to be inducted into the MAPS program at Moon Area High School. And I learned that in order to us to do our jobs effectively, we have to know a little bit more about our students. These students that I'm speaking to willingly come forward and share more information than they maybe otherwise would. Again, I'm sure that you all are aware of this, but definitely make sure you're considering the emotional, physical well-being of your students. Another thing that I'm known for is one of my PowerPoints or videos kind of gets all the kids to leave my room because it's really loud, but here's one I'll share with you really quickly.
Hi, my name is Mr. Bamford, and this is my son, Eddie, and behind the recorder is Anthony, and today we're going to make a video for you on when to use por and when to use para. I gave you a homework assignment, to be very honest with you. I should have given you something else, but there's that. So anyways, today we're going to act out 10 different situations for which you would use por and par. At the end, there will be a quiz. Anthony, wonderful. So whenever, Anthony, you come through the door again, whenever you come through, by, or along, that will be por. Eddie, walk to. And the bathroom is destination. Walk to the bathroom. The bathroom was his destination. Destination, para. Is that for me? Yeah. What is it? For me? Or? Oh, thank you. Is it a gift? Yeah. Thank you. So when somebody buys something for someone else, that is para. Anthony, did you go to the store buy the bananas for me? Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for buying this for me. Now, to be very honest with you, I'm not going to keep the banana. You just did this because I personally couldn't get to the store. So when you do something for someone else, that's like substitution because I'm lazy and you're not. Follow went to the door. The door is the destination. Leo, through the door.
Example, Mr. Bamford is ugly.
For example, is an example of an idiomatic expression. They just have to be very. Change is poor. He does chores for money.
You made this for the class.
For our last example, we said,
so some of the videos and PowerPoints are just personalized. And as a teacher, from the very, very beginning, I put myself out there, and the students know more about me than they probably should. But it's helped to build a bond. The whole idea behind storytelling with me, it's about being real, being organic, not being afraid to make mistakes. This video was made during when we were all locked down at home. It turned out to be a wonderful time with my children as well. I have other videos on YouTube, like just teaching grammars and things like that.
maybe not a mic.
Another concept I want to share with you, I come from a business background, and one thing that I would tell you is something called diminishing marginal utility, otherwise known as the law of diminishing returns. In my years of teaching, I've realized, if you look at the guy on the left, he's enjoying sitting down, having his first slice of pizza. It is absolutely delicious, measured in high utility. Second slice, still high degree of utility. Moving onwards down to 6 slices, he's not as happy as he was with the first and second slice of pizza. And by the 11th slice, he's not only not happy with the pizza, but quite disgusted with it. In terms of education, I would argue there's a fine line with how much input we give our students in any way, shape, or form, and the output for which we expect them to give. Teachers, I would encourage you to be aware, cognizant of exactly when enough is enough. Not meaning you stop teaching, but backing off, moving in a slightly different direction. But something that I share with my students, so they kind of begin to understand that some things that I do aren't quite just for random thoughts. Whoopsie. Realization number 7, reflect and rejuvenate. During the pandemic especially, but not necessarily limited to, teachers, to be effective and healthy, and I heard, agree with Alegria, which he was saying as well, in order to be effective to the children and the people in our lives, you must also take time to have your own thoughts. Find a place that you love to be. Doesn't have to be in the outdoors. If it's at the gym, if it's in the car, listening to an audiobook, sitting on the beach and what have you, I encourage you to sometimes, one thing I'm absolutely guilty of in my career is it took me a long time to realize that sometimes there is a concept of addition by subtraction, and improvement was made in places and times like these, instead of sitting in my room trying to make the next best lesson. In the MAPS program, I work with certified counselors and psychologists, and one of the greatest metaphors given would be you have to put the oxygen mask on first in order to be able to help people around you. Listen, we're creatures of habit, and our intentions are good, but when you start getting to the point where you're making mistakes and you can't do things for others, take a step back and do something for yourself. For my very, very last slide, hope everyone's mildly enjoying this. This is my visual of where I'm at in my career. Some people might say it went up in flames. My picture of this is, and I share this analogy with the students, trying to make them aware of how quickly the beginning of their student experience is there, how quickly it is to having graduated, moving to a next higher education, military or otherwise. And I say to them, as I would say to my audience, thank you for listening tonight. And I view my career as at the embers of a fire, meaning that I'm the hottest I've ever been. Hottest meaning I'm effective, hottest meaning that I'm more capable than anything at any time, but I'm closer to my professional end than I was at the beginning. And I simply savor every moment that I have with my students. And I would tell teachers out there, never take your profession for granted. I go back to my accounting days, and realistically, if that would have been my life, it would have been a sad, sad life. So realistically, dearest friends, hopefully you enjoyed my presentation. my simple hue and cry to you would be, storytelling is born by honestly being yourself, putting yourself out there, letting people laugh. Very honest with you. I probably try one class period a day. Not don't try, but like get them just laughing, and it's good and healthy. So anyways, let's talk. Any questions?
I'd like to remind everyone that the Q&A is a good place to ask questions. If you type a question, someone else might upvote it. But right now, we don't have any open questions for Buddy. I did see someone raise their hand, and they might want to be recognized to speak. Maybe, let me see if I can find that raised hand. Go ahead, Abir. Abir, maybe your microphone is muted. Okay, it looks like maybe Abir is not ready with a question after all. Anyone else?
Well, I have a few questions, if that's
Sarah.
quite all right. I think I'll take advantage. So this was fantastic. And as an educator, I honestly feel that my fire, my passion for teaching has been rekindled. So I liked your analogy of the years. I appreciate that. So what I wanted to ask you about as one of the things that I absolutely loved, an activity that we did was a senior, and this was a Spanish 5 honors class, but we did a parody video, and it was based on one of the stories that we read, and you really gave us what you called rienda suelta, free reign to have fun, do things that were silly, and have a good time. So as an educator, what inspired you to do that? What inspired you to let students do something so fun and so creative with so much leeway and ability to do what we're interested in?
Now, Sarah, the funny story is whenever I went back to school to become a teacher and had to kind of beg my parents to help me now figure out how I was going to pay for more education, my parents said to me, we knew you would never be an accountant. And they knew early, I love them dearly. They let me fail to succeed greater in life. The picture of the office space picture of having the wall knocked down, it was very, very clear to me that who I was as an essence was wildly different from other people. Even at all points in my life, I wear mismatched socks, didn't really care about that. And a lot of the students have learned that becomes part of who you are. And not having preconceived notions about what education should be helped me kind of reach for the sky. I mean, sad truth is the concept of self-fulfilling prophecy is more limiting than motivating, and the honest answer otherwise is that our first administrator that we worked under, when you were a student, literally handed me the keys to the room and said, build a program. And man, that was just license for crazy.
Love it. And then kind of piggybacking on that, it seemed like you also had high expectations for us and that you thought that we would be able to rise to the challenge. But there were times when I remember we were just kind of spending more time goofing off and having fun. And there was that too. But how do you sort of switch gears a little bit and maybe not necessarily stop the fun, but tie the curriculum back into the fun where possible?
That was diminishing marginal utility before I ever really had a name for it. But I had the feeling that you can't do the same thing every day, that even an effective teaching thing, a lot of the wonderful things that exist, you have to change things up. Nowadays, the students love book it. And if you start a book it and you do a book it every day, you can book them out, pretty quickly and so forth. So trying to having an open mind to it, having the kids have a laugh. One of the things is just letting the kids dictate what some of the parameters of the class they want you to have.
Definitely. And, kind of thinking about what you were talking about with engaging with students. Ultimately, for us, you always set a very good example of how to be a fantastic human being. You would engage with us, and we always felt welcome in Buddy's class. Every time we come in, it was always a fun experience. And so I feel like that kind of ties into our, making responsible decisions. You were able to model for us how we can ultimately be better people. And so we were able to have the experience with you. We were able to make up our crazy stories and learn from you. And ultimately, I think, make better decisions. I can certainly vouch that I don't know, thinking back to a point in my career, as I was one of those people, not in accounting, but I used to work in a cube farm, and I was a pretty disheartened corporate employee. And I can certainly say that whenever I had the opportunity to try being an instructor online, I don't know if I would have had the courage to jump out of my comfort zone and try it had I not had all of the fun experiences, especially in your class, Buddy. So I do want to thank you for that. I definitely appreciate it. Looks like we might have.
Yes, I'd like to call on Hytham to share a question.
Yes, hi. This is Hytham. I'm now at Berkeley, San Francisco. I would like to thank you, Buddy, for such an amazing presentation.
Thank
And,
you.
and I do share with you the same energy, the same wild and free spirit out of the office work. Because I feel like office work is more like, these kind of staying in such cubicles is more like a killer.
Mm-hmm.
As a teacher, you're kind of more humane, I would say, like more human, like you connect with students, and especially if you're so passionate about what you're doing and so connected to your students, and you do care about your students, it does give you a lot of meaning for your own life, yourself, and also for them, because you see yourself, you see your kids, you see future in these kids. And of course, at such age, either K-12 or even university, I teach at UC Berkeley, so but still, when you see these kids, they're somehow kind of fragile with everything that's happening around.
Yes.
So I do appreciate you sharing your own personal life with them, because this really does create some kind of a connection. They feel like, we're together in that, especially like with the last 2 years with the COVID and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is, for you to be that close, I think it's kind of a gray area. How close could you be? Because sometimes not all students will take it as connecting with them. Some students might misuse it. Especially that with COVID, everything was kind of, most of the borders, most of the lines were kind of erased, because work, shopping, visiting family was all online, was all in the house, like, or whatever the place that you're using, through the camera, through the internet, through online. So how close could you be to these students? Like, how much could you reveal about your own life, especially that not everyone is outgoing?
There's a crazy fine line. There is. You're always I've always, walked that line. One time I was reprimanded because I knew a student whose sister was using drugs, and I tried to, I wasn't, this is your brain on drugs, but it was, reaching out and trying to get real. There's a line you just simply can't cross. And it wasn't out of bad intent, but it was, a little bit further reach than I did. We get burned, but it doesn't change your wanting to help the students, just understanding how to help them. My biggest trick that I have going for me is I tend to know the younger siblings of the older students I have. I have the benefit of living in the district that I teach and have a lot of students that I know, and I rely heavily on the culture of my older students, my seniors and juniors, and to have honest dialogue. I also sponsor a group called Shout, which is a diversity group, in our district. And I understand that the words that we say unintentionally or intentionally, obviously unintentionally in my case, can hurt students. And understanding and progressing and being appropriate in the times we live in is an ongoing concern. Most of the times I've had students say to me on the side, like one time, specifically, I used to say to my students at school that I'm taking my family to a vacation on Neville Island. Neville Island is not a pretty place. It's more of it's financially despair. It's not, a bad place, but it's not an island you would go to like Hilton Head. And a student said, I grew up down there, and you know what I mean? I was like, oh, and yeah, so you learn that there's certain things you just simply don't say and assume that there's somebody in the class. And equally, if you have a student doing a project on a family tree, we've all lost someone. We know someone during COVID specifically, and before, we have to walk lightly. On Dia de los Muertos, you have to walk lightly, but yeah, there's a fine line. Sometimes we cross it, but we learn from that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, because I've tried something similar to that, and I had to go through something similar to that too. Mm-hmm. So this in itself is very supportive, because I feel I'm not the only one here.
No, listen, in your essence, that is your calling. And there's a line. Absolutely, we all know there's a line. But I think in my latter years of experience, you just know the right thing to say and right thing to do at the right time. And sometimes saying nothing is the right thing too. Yeah. And but don't be afraid of coming right up to it. I think that's what we were created to do,
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck to you, my friend.
Thank you.